You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
I'd like to welcome to the microphone this morning Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis. Good morning.
Good morning, manager of radio station 4CRB and chairman of the board.
I'm not chairman of the board.
Oh, aren't you chairman of the board?
No, Christine Smith is.
Oh, Christine, of course. Well, past chairman of the board.
I've never been chairman of the
board.
Look,
one thing Colin is very good at doing, listeners, he's not a liar, he never lies, but he's a bender of the truth.
Oh, look, there's nothing like a tall story, is there, David?
Oh, well, Australians, are we the masters of tall stories?
Yes.
Gosh. Yep.
Well, we did kindness last week.
Yes, we did.
And this week we've promised to tackle forgiveness, which is an interesting term. Some people are never able to achieve it at all in their life. If they're wronged or hurt in any way, shape or form, they carry it with them.
Grudge carriers.
Yes.
And isn't it funny, when we spoke last week about kindness, of course, forgiveness usually stems out of kindness.
It does.
If you're an unkind person, you still may forgive, but I think it'd be much harder to find. But if you're a person who really is amenable to kindness, I would have thought that the act of forgiving is a lot simpler, is more desirable. So forgiveness.
I'm going to examine that slightly, just for the fact that if we go back into history, and again we spoke about this last week, you go to France and if you're mistaken as an English person, you aren't treated very well at all. In fact, you may very well be treated with contempt.
Yes.
But that says to me that grudge is still there. Those negative feelings towards an entire race are still there. They haven't judged you personally.
No.
They've said, no, they're part of those baddies
over there. But don't you hear it with people who can't forgive the Germans?
Sure.
Yeah, I've heard it right throughout my life. Germans, I just know as a race they're disgraceful.
Well,
nothing as a race, in my view, is disgraceful. It's individuals who are disgraceful.
Look, it's understandable that people would have been cautious after the Second World War because, you're having Germans storm through your back fence every few years is a bit disturbing, isn't it?
Hard. Yes. So, look, and you speak of England and France. Well, England, of course, again, we need to remind listeners that round the time of Henry II, and he ruled from 1154 to 1189, England, virtually, part of England was three-quarters of what is today France.
Yes.
Poitou, Auvergne, Aquitaine, they were all parts of the Kingdom of England. Now, the Kingdom of France was only about 200 kilometres around Paris.
Yes.
But what always caused the problems, the English king who owned, and I never understood why they accepted to this, the English king, and I'll use Henry II because he's arguably the greatest monarch of having this empire. And he was the father of Richard the Lionheart. And so he, through his wife, Eleanor, Aquitaine was the biggest, dukedom, if you like, in France. And Eleanor of Aquitaine was married to the King of France, so to secure it. But when she saw young Prince Henry, he was 18, Eleanor was 28, and I think I've said it before, she was evidently, universally throughout Europe, the most beautiful woman. Just stunningly pretty, but also smart. When she met Henry, she fell madly in love with him because 18-year-old Henry was a prince of England then, and he'd come with his mother to pay respects to the King of France, Louis. I think it was about Louis IX or Louis VIII. And his mother, Matilda, she was married to the Count of Anjou, another French possession. Now, he was obviously, as a boy, going to inherit that. He met this beautiful Eleanor, and she decided she wanted him. and she was 10 years older, but didn't matter. And so she divorced. She got some divorce from the Pope, and so she married him. So all of a sudden, Aquitaine and Anjou, through his father and through his mother, he becomes this massive landowner in France, incorporates it into the Kingdom of England, but obviously the rules of land tenure then were strict. So while he was the King of England, he was the overlord and prince of Anjou and Aquitaine, and his liege lord was the King of France. So he avoided it and avoided it and avoided it, and in about 1186 he could avoid it no longer. He did homage to the King of France, King Philip. This was Louis's son. And so he had to accept, I'm the king of the greatest, really, European empire, and yet I have to bow down to you, the King of France, when you don't own much at all. So that's what's always been a bitterness, and it carries through to today between the English and the French. But I see that President Macron had a really successful state visit to England only recently. And so while they've been always hesitant about each other, they have been allies. And it hasn't helped that on two occasions the English and the English-speaking world have saved France.
Look, it's funny.
That hasn't helped.
The thing that interests me the most is that I don't believe in genetic memory. I don't think that is actually a thing, even though some people do see it in...
So do you believe in witchcraft?
No. The point I'm trying to make is that there are some certain actions that we carry through our DNA, but memorising that someone was mean to me 100 or 200 or 300 years ago is not correct. But on the flip side of the coin, it still must be carried through the generations verbally.
We're seeing it now with African Americans and now West Indian English saying, we want reparations. You owe us. Because we were bought to work on, in the England case, we were bought to Jamaica and the West Indies to work on English plantations. Same in the United States. Now, there are certain voices saying, but you weren't. You've been born, it was abolished, you've grown up. Yes, as a black person, you have been subject to racism. But don't accuse the government of being racist, because if the US government was racist, well, there'd be no African American pop culture, pop stars. There would be no Ray Charles. There would be no Ariana Grande is more Latino, but it's the country is not racist. There would never have been Barack Obama as a president. And so try to find where you cut the line. Are there racist people in our societies? Yes, there are.
Look, and
they're non-forgivers.
We can't erase the things that have happened in our past. They happened, but we didn't. We can be confident in the fact that we weren't there making the choices, but we can learn from what has transpired in the past and ensure that it doesn't happen again.
And that's what we have done. No African American freed himself. It took the slaving groups, that is, the Anglo-Celtic Americans, who brought the slaves over to work on the plantations. It was them who said, no, we've learnt enough, this is wrong, it has to stop. It's the same in England. No West Indian, the most beautifully spoken English person, and I've worked with West Indian British KCs now, and if you stand and hear them walking through a door, they speak with the most beautiful English accent. You turn around and you're looking at a person of Negro race, but has been born and raised in the United Kingdom. Now, it's really important for them to remind themselves it was they You know, the English, the Peel Act, 1833, banned slavery.
Sure.
And arrested English slave ships, sent the Royal Navy down the west coast of Africa to interdict them. It was Abraham Lincoln in 1862 who passed the Emancipation Act. And so it was those people who did abuse, they finally got to a point of common sense.
Yes.
There's absolutely no difference between a black, a yellow, a white. We are all the same. It's that our cultures are different.
And that's the point to make.
Yeah.
I, as you say, there is a group of people who are saying that reparations should be paid. And I remember reading it might have been a debate, or I saw something on television, and they were looking for so many $1 trillion for all of the labour that the African Americans had put forward into cotton plantations and never got paid for. And I think the closing argument on the other side was, I'd love to pay you. We realise we've done the wrong thing, and we understand that that's
we haven't done it.
Bear with me.
Yes.
But he said, unfortunately, I'd love to, but my grandfather had his wallet taken by the Germans in Dachau, and I haven't got any money.
Yeah.
I think the point we make here is that we can look back in our past and find that there are adversities or troubling times in everyone's background.
I think all you can do in the current generation is acknowledge what your people did, what other people did, acknowledge it as wrong, and then thank God we don't do that now.
And have learnt.
And we all have learnt. Not just the white man needed. Look, the biggest slavers are the Arabs throughout history. You know, the biggest slave trading people. And many say Arab nations are still trading in slaves.
Wow.
Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know is you can look back and learn from the past, but you can't make the current generation guilty for it.
Absolutely.
And you can't make them responsible now for their irresponsible great-great-great-grandparents.
Well, look, it's still here with us today. The Aboriginal question is still front and centre here in Australia. If we look towards Israel and the Arab areas, they're still in conflict over similar sort of issues. Yeah. We've talked about the French-English one that is very, very old indeed.
Japan-China.
Japan
saw the Chinese as just inferior and nothing people.
Yes.
And they really treated the Chinese badly. The Chinese... The Emperor of China was known as the Sun King, as same as the King of France in the Louis. And as the Sun King, the Chinese Emperor to the Chinese was the centre of the universe, and all other races were created to serve the Chinese. Now, that might have something to do with why the Japanese hated them, and then when the Japanese got the upper hand. So where are we heading with all this? We're heading, these type of useless polemics will go on until there is a clear acceptance of forgiveness.
And that's the point we're coming back to. And again, it is understanding, and it is setting aside our petty differences and our petty grievances and things that have transpired in the past. The word feud comes to mind at times, and it's still, I was astounded to hear that there were families that were still not talking to each other until all of those terrible fires that came through just before. Was it before COVID, I think?
I think it was round before COVID,
yes, and families had to band together and fight fires together, and feuds that had been going on for generations had disappeared through that trial of fire, for want of a better term.
Yeah, and that's a good way to put it, really. The trial of fire brought about the action of forgiving. I hope that once the fires were out, it didn't go back like on the Western Front in 1914, when on Christmas Day the Germans got out of their trenches and they exchanged cigarettes with the British Tommies and kicked a soccer ball around, and then at about 4 or 5 o'clock went back into their trenches and started shooting at each other again. I mean, the human condition And what we're talking about over these next couple of weeks, last week, kindness, today forgiveness. What will we do next week?
I have a list in my office,
yes,
and forgive me, I have forgotten.
Well, and it's good because they're all about the human condition and how it really behooves us regularly to look at ourselves. I know at times when I feel unjustifiedly treated and hurt, that immediate response, fight fire with fire, no, fight it with silence or with quietness.
Yes. It's interesting. Fire with fire just escalates, but
it does.
If you can find a different angle, if you can find a different way, a different approach, often people are expecting the fire and fire approach.
Yeah, yes.
And it's interesting to see the reaction you get. But going back to the mechanism of forgiveness, because
yes.
there are some people who can't even...
Can't even spring it up in them.
Well, initially there's anger, there's hurt, there's vengeance, there's any number of emotions that, and it stems with an angry thought about someone who is wronged.
You just said the key word. These are all emotions.
Yes.
Forgiveness, kindness, anger, vengeance is really emotions.
Yes.
Why is it that the good ones tend like kindness and forgiveness, why is it that they are sort of so hard to bring about? Whereas anger, to strike up, strike back, hit, payback, it comes really quickly. And that makes me reflect now, as we're speaking, on the brilliance of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Because his whole life was about forgiveness, wasn't it?
Yes.
And certainly, and out of forgiveness came kindness. As I said at the beginning, these two emotions, if you're kind, it's much more easy to forgive. If you forgive, it's much easier to be kind. And so when you look at his life, only 3 years really of teaching, he was the epitome of forgiveness.
Yes, absolutely.
And he came to offer that way.
Well, let's walk through the mechanics, David, because often it is hard to turn away from those angry feelings, especially if there has been no apology, the other side is not.
And hurt.
Hurt is another one. And the other side is not willing to say that they did the wrong thing. They believe they're in the right.
Yes.
And your feelings are still hurt through action, through words, whatever it may be. It is and again, one of the things that I often stand back from, and I remember seeing a lady, her son had been murdered. I can't remember whether it was intentional or not, but I remember seeing the hurt on her face, and it wasn't too far beyond that she said, I can forgive them. Yes. But they're going to have to understand what they've done.
Well, I actually saw that in reality in 1986. I was prosecuting 9 of 11 men, 9 had been caught, for the most violent sexual assault upon a 56-year-old woman, the wife of one of the top Australian doctors who could have made a fortune staying in Australia, but he spent his whole life ministering to, they were devout Christians, ministering to the wild Highland people, because he came up in 1956, and it was only in 1956 that the Highlands had been opened up. Well, she suffered the most terrible, violent assault. I was there, I prosecuted 3 of them, and they were given lengthy terms of imprisonment. And then they got a young man from another province. He'd come down, he'd given himself up because he had become a Christian. And he said, if I don't get forgiven, I will go to hell. You know, a Highland tribal man. He was 19, I think. The oldest of them was 20.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was 11 of them. And anyway, I thought, right. And he came. He was brought to me by prison guards that he wants you to ask the lady if she would forgive him. And I said, yes, I will. Well, I had every social worker, and they were all Australian, New Zealand, British, say, no, she won't be able to, she'll be traumatised. She was a strong woman. So I did ask her, and I said, would you be prepared to forgive him? She said, yes, of course. And so she's 58 at this time, he's 20. And he comes in and they're manacled. They have chains around their ankles with the chains going up to a metal belt around their waist and chains going from that thing down to their wrists, and their hands are together. And anyway, he gets brought in and he sees her. She's sitting in the chair in my office and he collapses. He falls to the ground and starts sobbing. She gets up out of her chair and says to him, in pidgin, she was fluent in it, James, please stand up. Oh, no, he can't. His head's down and he's shaking. And she said, if you want me to forgive you, James, stand up. So he looks up at her, and he was a handsome young boy, really. And she says, James, what a beautiful face. And you now realise what you've done with that beautiful face. Give me your hand. And so these two shaking hands, manacled, come up. She takes his hands and lifts him up. She was hurt. She steps back to her chair, sits down, and James goes down on his knees in front of her. She puts his hands on her knees and her hands on this. And she says, look at me, James. Look at me really closely. In pidgin. And he's looking, And she says, you are forgiven. That's the end of this.
Wow.
And he the prison guards had to, he fell forward and put his manacled arms on her hips. She was happy. But the prison guard said, you can't do this, this is a white woman. Anyway, they came to take him away, and she said, just leave him for a minute. She then put her hands on his head, sobbing into her lap, and she said, now remember, James, you are forgiven.
Wow.
And he got up, walked out, went into court, pleaded guilty, and the others all got 12 years. He ended up getting 8 because he pleaded guilty. The others we had to go to trial on.
Yes.
Now, it's never left me that.
Yes.
The most indecent violation that any human, man or woman, can suffer, and particularly a woman, and she was like that little Irish girl a couple of years later who just said, no, when I had a shower, I washed it out.
And it's funny, isn't it? You think of someone who's lost a son, carried that child, got them to 18 years of age, and that child has been taken from them.
Yes.
And they're able to forgive the person who took that life. That is a very interesting walk indeed, isn't it? Through your emotions and through those thought processes.
It takes courage, and it takes strength, and it takes character. And it takes an acceptance of something more than just you. Well,
we have roughly 2 minutes to go, David. I was going to get you to summarise.
You?
No.
You notice, listener, how he always runs away from it. Well, I think we've really summed it up. Forgiveness, like kindness, is something that is the softest of human emotions, but in many ways, forgiveness particularly, the hardest to bring about. So what that requires of you is you challenge yourself. Because I've heard people say, if I hadn't have forgiven this, I could never have purged myself of hatred, or I could never have forgiven myself.
Yes. And it's funny how anger can be very overwhelming. It can stifle thought. It can remove common sense.
Oh, definitely.
And it can hang around your neck like a cancer.
Yes.
Yeah, terrible.
Well, for everyone listening out there, this woman's first name was Gwen. And I'd like you, if you've listened to the show and you've liked it, remember the story of Gwen and a young 19-year-old man called James.
There we go. David Ashton Lewis, until next week, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you as always, Colin.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4crb.com.